The War Council of the Xyrrak Dominion gathered in a chamber of shimmering obsidian, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the holographic battlefield before them. The most advanced fleet in the known galaxy, vast, impenetrable, and armed with weapons capable of reducing planets to dust, hovered above the devastated remains of the Yevon cluster. It was their crowning achievement, a demonstration of technological supremacy and an undeniable warning to the rest of the cosmos. Yet the hologram flickered. One of the warlords leaned forward, mandibles clicking in irritation. Replay that sequence. The footage reversed, then resumed. There it was again, a shadow beneath the wreckage of a ruined moon, a massive, hulking shape, barely visible against the abyss of space. The high strategist, HFY, narrowed his eyes. Enhance! The image sharpened. A dreadnought, unlike anything they had ever seen, emerged from the darkness. A relic of a long-dead war. A human warship. It should have been debris. Another corpse of steel lost in the void. But instead, it moved. It moved with intent. The humans had no right to still be in this battle. Their fleets were destroyed, their colonies reduced to slag. They were an inferior species, a civilization barely out of its infancy compared to the millennia-spanning empire of the Xyrrak Dominion. And yet, the dreadnought rose. The Xyrrak warlords exchanged uneasy glances as the ancient human warship powered up, its hull glowing with unknown energy signatures, a defiant challenge against an enemy that had already declared victory. A voice from one of the younger tacticians trembled with disbelief. That vessel was buried for decades. No human should have survived the bombardment. How is it operational? A second silence followed. Then the weapons of the human dreadnought roared to life, and the impossible began. The Xyrrak Dominion had spent centuries refining warfare into an art of annihilation. Their empire stretched across hundreds of systems, subjugating lesser civilizations with ruthless efficiency. No species had ever resisted them for long, until the humans. When the war began, the Dominion expected a swift conquest. Humanity lacked the sheer scale, technological superiority, and disciplined military structure that defined the Xyrrak war machine. Their fleets were scattered, their weapons outdated, and their homeworld vulnerable. Yet, the war had dragged on far longer than the Xyrrak anticipated, with humanity proving far more stubborn than projected. At first, the Dominion dismissed their resistance as desperation. Then came the tactics, brutal, unorthodox, and maddeningly unpredictable. The humans didn't fight like the other species. They adapted, improvised, and refused to break, even when the logical course was surrender. It had taken decades, but finally, after a long and bitter campaign, the Dominion had cornered the last of humanity's military presence. The Battle of the Yevon cluster was to be their final defeat. The Dominion fleet had glassed planets, shattered stations, and wiped out entire battalions. By all accounts, humanity was done, and yet the dreadnought had risen. The Perseverance was a relic of another time, built in the desperate days of humanity's early interstellar wars. It had been designed as a last-stand fortress, a warship meant to fight even when all hope was lost. It had vanished decades ago, presumed destroyed when one of its own reactors had gone critical in a battle over the Yevon cluster. But the ship had not perished. Buried under the wreckage of the shattered moon Sci-Fi 4, it had waited. And inside, something had survived. Commander Elias Voss had been among the original crew when the ship was lost. He should have been dead. By all calculations, survival in such conditions was impossible. The ship had no access to outside resources, no functional power core, nothing, but he was alive. The Xyrrak Dominion warlords didn't understand how. They didn't comprehend how the ancient dreadnought was still moving, or how a single human warship had suddenly powered up as if it had been waiting for this exact moment. What they failed to realize was that the Perseverance was not just a warship. It was an idea, and ideas were impossible to kill. High strategist HFY observed the unfolding events with growing unease. The Dominion had invested everything into this battle, this victory. Yet something was wrong. The human Dreadnought, old and outdated by all logic, should have been nothing more than a rotting husk. Instead, it was responding. It was fighting back. The holographic display flickered as his tactical officers struggled to make sense of what they were seeing. "This is impossible," muttered Admiral Xyrrak, a veteran of dozens of campaigns. "That vessel is obsolete. It cannot hold against the full might of our fleet." Yet before their very eyes, the Perseverance began to move with terrifying precision. It did not attack in the conventional manner. It did not engage in the careful, calculated exchanges of fire that defined Dominion warfare. Instead, it lunged straight through the formation of their ships. Xyrrak war doctrine was built on superior numbers, methodical engagements, and overwhelming firepower. Their fleets were designed for control and containment, not for dealing with a single rogue warship that refused to follow the rules. And this warship fought like a predator. The humans had a phrase one HFY had read about during the war, a relic from their primitive past, back when they were bound to a single planet. A wounded animal is the most dangerous, and now, before his very eyes, humanity was proving it true. The Perseverance should have been nothing more than wreckage. Every tactical model, every war projection, every assumption the Xyrrak Dominion had about human warfare said the same thing. This ship was an anomaly that would be swiftly crushed. Yet as the Dominion fleet tightened its formation to obliterate the rogue warship, the Perseverance responded with a maneuver none of them expected. It did not flee. It charged. The Dominion's war doctrine was built on calculated destruction. They believed in complete dominance, where the enemy never had a chance to counterattack. Their capital ships were designed for overwhelming firepower, not evasion. But the Perseverance, it moved like a living thing. Elias Voss gritted his teeth as he adjusted the ship's course, fingers dancing over controls that should have rusted into uselessness decades ago. The Perseverance was old, but it was built differently than Dominion ships. Where their vessels were sleek and efficient, his ship was a brawler. It was not a ship that fired from a distance. It was not a ship that relied on shields and precision attacks. It was a warhammer, designed to break through enemy lines, to fight at point-blank range, and to keep going until there was nothing left to fight. The first collision was catastrophic. The Perseverance plowed through a Xyrrak destroyer, the sheer mass of the Dreadnought crushing the smaller vessel as if it were a tin can. The Xyrrak warlords watching from their command stations flinched. They had never seen a ship do this before. "This is not strategy," Xyrrak hissed, mandibles clicking in frustration. "This is madness." Yet it was working. With every second that passed, the Dominion's fleet hesitated. They were used to fighting enemies who followed patterns, enemies who feared them. But the Perseverance, this human warship, fought as if it had nothing to lose. And that was what made it terrifying. Inside the Perseverance, Elias Voss wasn't alone. He should have been. By all logic, no crew should have survived for this long, inside a ship buried beneath the wreckage of a moon. But humanity was not a species that accepted logic when survival was on the line. In the years since the ship was lost, its crew had endured. They had cannibalized failing systems, rationed resources beyond all reason, and turned the interior of the ship into something half-mad, half-genius. Deep in the engineering decks, Lieutenant Aria Moreau sat in a mess of cables, her hands flying over an improvised control panel. "The fusion core is at 60% capacity," she muttered over comms, wiping sweat from her forehead. "We Won't last long if we keep burning through reserves like this. We don't need long, Voss responded from the bridge, his voice calm. We just need to make them hesitate. He knew the Dominion's greatest weakness. They didn't know how to fight a war of attrition. The Xyrrak calculated every battle down to the last resource, the last soldier, the last moment of engagement. They were logical, precise, predictable. But humans? Humans fought dirty. The Xyrrak warlords had never feared a single ship before, yet, as the battle unfolded, that fear grew. They watched as their warships struggled to keep up with the brutal, reckless tactics of the Perseverance. The Dreadnought did not maneuver. Like an outdated vessel, it attacked with terrifying intelligence, exploiting every weakness in their formation. Then the Xyrrak began receiving strange transmissions. At first, they thought it was interference. Then the voices became clear, human laughter. It echoed through their comms like a ghost, like a mockery. The Perseverance was broadcasting directly into their systems, letting them hear the voices of the crew. Dominion Fleet, Elias Voss's voice rang out calm, yet laced with something almost predatory. You've come a long way just to die here. It was impossible. No human should have had access to their encrypted channels. No human should have dared to taunt them like this. But humans did not play by their rules. HFY's claws tightened around the edges of his command seat. What is this? A junior officer looked pale under the shifting blue lights of the war room. They are not afraid of us. And for the first time in the history of the Xyrrak Dominion, they felt fear. The Dominion's fleet adjusted their tactics. If brute force wasn't enough, they would use overwhelming numbers. 1,000 ships began closing in. The Perseverance could not win this battle, not in any conventional sense. But Elias Voss had never intended to win. He had intended to make them. "Bleed! Aria!" he called over comms. "Initiate the blackout protocol!" Silence. Then a sharp exhale. "You're insane!" Voss grinned. "That's what they're afraid of." All across the Xyrrak fleet, systems crashed, screens flickered, weapons malfunctioned. The humans had hacked their systems using a combination of old Dominion frequencies and jury-rigged human tech that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. The fleet fell into chaos. And the Perseverance. It vanished back into the abyss. High Strategist HFY sat in silence, staring at the now empty battlefield. The humans had not won. Their ship was gone, their forces shattered, but the battle was no longer the issue. Because now, the Dominion understood something truly terrifying. The humans never stop fighting, even when they should be dead, even when there is nothing left to fight for. And the worst part, they had no idea how many more warships were still waiting in the darkness. The Xyrrak fleet hung in a state of chaos. The Perseverance had disappeared, leaving behind nothing but wreckage and uncertainty. No enemy had ever done this to them. No species had ever survived this long against their absolute control. But the battle was not over, because the Dreadnought was not gone. It was waiting. High Strategist HFY's mandibles twitched as he scanned the battlefield, his warlords barking. Orders to re-establish control. "Find that ship," he hissed. His officers scrambled, but the sensors showed nothing. The Perseverance had vanished into the debris field, using the wreckage of destroyed vessels as a cloak, a shadow in the dark. HFY's instincts screamed that something was wrong. Then the sensors flared red. The Dreadnought re-emerged, but not from where they had expected. It came from below, where the Dominion's fleet had left itself exposed. A human might have called it ambush tactics. To the Xyrrak, it was nightmare fuel. The first strike hit hard. The Perseverance launched a full payload of kinetic torpedoes designed to bypass energy shields and tear through hulls like razors. The Dominion ships, still struggling to recalibrate from the blackout, didn't have time to react. The first explosion sent a battlecruiser into a death spiral, breaking apart under the sheer force of impact. Then the Dreadnought moved, slipping through their formation like a predator striking from the shadows. It shouldn't have been possible. By all calculations, the human ship should not have lasted this long, yet it fought harder than an entire armada. On the bridge of the Perseverance, Commander Elias Voss braced himself as the ship took another hit. Sparks erupted from damaged consoles, and alarms howled in protest. How much longer can we keep this up? Aria Moreau's voice came through the comms, strained but steady. Voss glanced at the status display. Not long. The ship was burning through its last reserves. But that didn't matter. Just long enough, he said. He opened a direct transmission to the Dominion fleet, his voice ringing out across the war channels. You wanted humanity gone, he said. But we don't. Die easy. There was silence. Then Xyrrak himself responded, You cannot win this battle, human. His voice was colder than the vacuum between stars. Your ship is failing. You are outnumbered. You fight for nothing. Voss smiled. Funny. I was about to say the same to you. Then he activated the final failsafe. The Dominion fleet had assumed the Perseverance was an old relic, outdated and barely functional. What they hadn't realized was that it had been rebuilt. For decades, the surviving crew had worked in the dark, scavenging, adapting, and modifying. Their ship with stolen Xyrrak technology. The humans had done something unthinkable. They had rewired their fusion core into a weapon, and now they were going to use it. The Dreadnought's engines flared to full power, setting a direct collision course with the Dominion's command ship, the Vindicator of Dominion, Xyrrak's personal flagship. For the first time in his life, the High Strategist felt true panic. Evasive action. He roared. But it was too late. The Perseverance was moving too fast, its hull glowing with the last remnants of power it had left. It was not retreating. It was taking them with it. Inside the Perseverance, the crew braced for impact. Aria Moreau let out a sharp breath, her hands tightening on the controls. This is insane, Voss chuckled. That's why it'll work. The final transmission from the Dreadnought echoed across every open channel, a last message from a species that refused to die quietly. Tell your empire. Voss's voice rang out. Humanity sends its regards. The ship slammed into the Dominion flagship with the force of a dying star. The explosion tore through the Xyrrak fleet, a blinding inferno of destruction that left dozens of warships crippled, their formations broken beyond repair. The Perseverance was gone, but its legacy remained. The surviving Dominion ships, scattered and leaderless, began to retreat. The loss of their High Strategist, their command ship, and dozens of warships had broken them in a way they had never experienced before. This was supposed to have been their moment of victory. Instead, they had lost. Not in numbers. Not in technology. They had lost something greater, the illusion of their own invincibility. For the first time, the Xyrrak feared humanity, and in the empty void, where the Perseverance had made its final stand, one truth burned brighter than the wreckage. Humanity was not defeated. They were just getting started. The battlefield was silent. The wreckage of the Perseverance drifted among the remains of shattered Dominion warships. Flames flickered in the vacuum, the dying embers of a battle that should never have been possible. For the first time in history, the Xyrrak Dominion had retreated. They had not been outgunned. They had not been outnumbered. They had been outmatched by something they could not understand, human defiance. From the command deck of a damaged Xyrrak warship, the surviving warlord stood in stunned silence. Xyrrak was gone, his flagship destroyed, along with dozens of their most powerful vessels. What remained of their fleet was leaderless, fractured, and worst of all, afraid. Admiral Krizith clenched his mandibles, staring at the debris cloud where the Perseverance had made its final stand. The humans, they chose to die. His voice was quiet, filled with something his subordinates had never heard before. Respect. One of the junior officers shuddered. They fought, knowing they would lose. Krizith exhaled. No, they fought knowing they would win something greater. The Xyrrak had always believed victory meant survival. But humans saw victory differently. To them, victory was about the message they left behind. And now the Dominion had received that message loud and clear. They would never underestimate humanity again. In the shadow of the battle's aftermath, a lone escape pod drifted toward an unknown sector of space. Inside, Commander Elias Voss stirred. His body ached, his vision blurred, but he was alive. The Perseverance was gone. His crew, he didn't know how many had survived, but as long as one of them was still breathing, their fight was not over. A small light flickered on the pod's control panel. Incoming transmission. Voss hesitated before pressing the button. A voice crackled through the static. Commander Voss, his breath caught. It was Aria Moreau. You didn't think I'd let you die alone, did you? She said, her voice carrying the same reckless determination that had kept them alive for so long. Voss let out a breath, a slow, painful chuckle escaping his lips. Wouldn't dream of it. In the months that followed, rumors spread across the galaxy. The story of the Perseverance reached every outpost, every hidden corner of space where resistance against the Dominion still flickered like dying embers. But now, those embers burned. Hotter. The Dominion's enemies whispered of the human Dreadnought that defied extinction. They spoke of a battle where one dying warship shattered an empire's confidence, and they asked the same question: if a single human warship could do this, what happens when more of them rise? High in the Dominion's war chambers, new strategies were being drafted. New contingencies were being planned. But no matter what they prepared, one undeniable truth remained. The humans had changed the war forever. They had proven that even in the face of certain annihilation, they would fight. And now the Dominion would never sleep soundly again. Because somewhere in the abyss, more human dreadnoughts waited, and the galaxy was only beginning to understand what that truly meant.